Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in our winter webinar series presented by St. Joseph's College, Reverse Mentoring and Unexpected Reward. We're so happy to have so many supporters of our SJC Mentor program here with us, as well as some of our alumni and students. We're looking at the names as you're all logging on, and we just want to thank you, reaching out to George, Paulina, some other individuals that we've seen, Abigail, Jennifer James, our first speaker that did our Hot Topics and Trends in 21st Century Mentoring. So we want to thank all of you for joining us. We're so excited that you're here today. And as you're logging on, I just want to remind you of a couple of housekeeping items. My name is Karen Katushin. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement here for St. Joseph's College, Long Island. I'll be doing some live polling. I'll also be helping to answer any questions or relay any feedback that's coming in. And if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to use that raise the hand button or also type anything in the chat box that you'd like to know. Frank and Jen might also be asking you for feedback throughout the webinar, so you can definitely utilize the chat box feature for that. Jennifer Piscitelli is an alumna of the class of 2015 and 2017. She's also an adjunct professor here at St. Joseph's College. We are thrilled to have her here with us. Frank Pomata, labor counselor with Suffolk County Department of Labor, and Frank is also a consultant at large for nonprofits, leadership, and consulting in general. So we want to thank him so much for being here. And Jen and Frank are actually two of our most engaged and active mentors. So we're so thrilled that we have not only their participation on this webinar as a speaker, but they're also with us throughout the year as a mentor as well. So without further ado, we'd like to turn it over to Frank and Jen so that they can tell you a little bit about themselves and why they're here. Thank you both for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Like Karen said, my name is Jennifer Piscitelli. I've been in healthcare now for over 25 years in different roles, both clinical and administratively. I am an adjunct here at St. Joseph's, which has been one of the greatest things I've done up to this point. And when I was asked to be a mentor, I absolutely jumped at the chance.
Hi, folks. I'm Frank Pomata, as Jen mentioned, and Karen, and I'm with the Suffolk County Department of Labor as my day job. But I also engage the community. I live here in Patchogue. I'm a friend of the college, and I've had the privilege of being a mentor to several St. Joe's students. So I'm happy to be here and share my insights with you.
So before we actually get into the topic of reverse mentoring, we'd like to see what you know about it, if anything. So we're going to go ahead and start with our first live poll. When you see that poll on the screen, it's going to be called, have you heard of reverse mentoring before? Go ahead and select your answer. Yes, no, maybe, or I'm not sure. So go ahead and enter the choice that best fits you right now. We'll share the results in a second once most, if not everyone, has had a chance to respond. Thank you for your answers. I see we have about 75% of us have answered so far, so I'll hang on just a moment longer for a few more responses. And let's go ahead and take one more moment. Okay, and now I think we can go ahead and share that poll, and let's see what Frank and Jen think of the results. So 47% said yes, 33% said no, 13% said maybe, and 7% said I'm not sure. So for those of you, the 47% who said yes, feel free to go ahead and type in the chat box anything you think you know about reverse mentoring, what it is, where you've heard about it before, even if you might have heard about it but not know what it is. What do you think of those results, Jen and Frank?
So I didn't expect as many people to know what reverse mentoring is, because even though I have been a mentor, I hadn't heard of that term until very recently.
I'm going to echo the same thing Jen is saying, is that I had no idea almost half of the folks here would have heard about this particular concept, because again, just like, I too as a mentor had not heard of the specific term, even though I had experienced it within the dynamics of the relationships with my mentees.
So as Frank and Jen explain a little bit about reverse mentoring to you now, see if it matches up with what you think you know, and we'll check in with you before we go to another poll to see if you learned anything new.
So for those of you who don't know what reverse mentoring means, the purpose of the webinar is for Frank and I to go over what it is, what it means, who's involved in it, how you can benefit from it. So like I had said, when I was asked to mentor, I absolutely jumped at the chance to do that. I felt that it was my opportunity to speak about my career experiences, meet new people who were either just coming into the industry or were new grads, and form relationships with them and see how I could assist them. And then at some point, I started to hear the term reverse mentoring, and it's as simple as it sounds, really. The mentor is getting something in reverse out of the relationship. It's not just the mentee gaining knowledge and learning how to do things, but throughout the relationship, the mentor is actually gaining experience and a lot of benefits as well.
You know, it strikes me as a parallel here, you know, with volunteerism in general, and those of us in the FJC mentoring program are all volunteers, and I have often found that when you speak to a volunteer, and maybe a volunteer award ceremony or in other settings, almost invariably they say, gee, I feel like I got more out of this than I gave to whatever the project is, or whether it was another mentoring program or volunteering for. And again, within the context of my own mentoring relationships, I learned new terms, and I was able to ask the mentee to tell me more about that, current practices, new ways of doing the same things I might have been doing, different means of communication, etc. So again, it was a two-way dynamic relationship, and then I heard about this term reverse mentoring, and it all clicked into place. So I think it's good for us to sort of expand upon that and build upon it like we're doing in this webinar. So thank you.
So if you have any thoughts or questions regarding reverse mentoring based on what Frank and Jen just said, feel free to type them in the chat box as we move on and give you another poll. So first, before we kind of segue to the next part of our webinar, we'd like to ask you, how large of an organization do you work for? Now, some of you work for many organizations, so feel free to choose the one that you want to go with right now. So whether it's 1 to 5 employees, 5 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 500, or more than 500 employees. And you'll see why Frank and Jen were curious about this when we focus on the next slide. So go ahead and take your moment to submit your choice, and we'll share the results and break it down in the next slide with you. 75% of us have responded, so if you want to make sure your voice is heard, go ahead and choose a selection. Interesting. Really interesting results. I can't wait to see what Frank and Jen say. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results. Now let's take a look at where our participants are working. 17% said between 5 and 50 employees. 42% said 100 to 500 employees. 42% said more than 500 employees. So almost an equal split, really, between 42 exactly. And that's significant for mentoring, right? I think that definitely has an impact on your experience.
It absolutely does. I agree. So I frequently say to people, regardless of where you're working or if it's an official role or an unofficial role, if you are the go-to person in your family, at your workplace, at your system, in your company, at your small mom and pop shop, chances are you're already a mentor if you're the go-to person. When I was a very young person starting off clinically in healthcare, I didn't have an official mentor, and being a young person in uncharted waters, so to speak, it's what I really needed, but didn't understand that at the time and didn't even know to ask for assistance before running headlong into certain situations that either I should not have or could have done in a very, very different way. And I worked with a surgeon named Soterios Filippo, who would sit with me and say, sometimes, my dear, there comes a time where the warrior becomes the wise man. And it always stood out in my mind, those words that he said, but I didn't really understand the true benefit or what that meant until midway through my career, which I'm at now. Again, running headlong into things and situations, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to do it my way, I'm going to make this big impact, but not knowing how to navigate can be very, very detrimental. And at this point, now that I'd like to consider myself the wise man in this saying, it's time to give back. It's time to reach back to people that are just coming into the industry or are just recently graduating. Explain my experiences, maybe give them a heads up, not just what to do, but probably what not to do, being as important as what to do. It's also the opportunity, being a mentor here with St. Joseph's College, to stay involved with the school that has given so much to me during my undergrad, my graduate, and now as an employee. I really think that staying involved past graduation is incredibly important, and mentoring or being a mentee is absolutely a way to do that. Cultivating new talent is very, very important to me. We put a lot of time and energy into the work that we do in healthcare as well as in many other industries. And in order to really see the emerging talent and assist people in that and really identify emerging leaders, it's important to have that networking with the newer people coming into the field. And in terms of cultivating a college-to-career pipeline for recent graduates, again, it's all about the networking and really assisting in getting people to the places that they should be, where they may not have had the opportunity or the knowledge to do that on their own.
Well, I'm going to go back to the poll first. Thank you, Jen, for your contributions on that. Wholeheartedly agree with everything you said. It was a little bit of a surprise how many folks are from larger organizations, because to me, what's great about that is it presents us with the opportunity, there's multiple opportunities for mentoring. I often work for much smaller organizations in the nonprofit and human services field, so consequently, those opportunities were not as readily available. The organizations may or may not have had the capacity to sponsor a more formalized program. That being said, I would seek out the guidance of more experienced folks. And, the point is well taken, too. Sometimes we get this really great idea that, we're burning to start, or we feel, I should say, change this up and whatnot. And yet, maybe we're not the first person who has that idea, or maybe there are some structural or other reasons that didn't work. So having the guidance and counsel of a mentor sort of bounce that off. Maybe you are actually the first person proposing something. So perhaps a person like that can help guide you in polishing your proposal, pitching it to the right people in the organization. There's a new term that I heard recently, a sponsor. We have a mentor, and that person is kind of a guide on the side, but they may not be in a position of authority to greenlight a project or to help us shepherd it through the organization. So having a sponsor, and they may be one of the same, they may not, that person's role is that of someone who can say, yeah, this is good, and perhaps connect us to the right person, or maybe the other person would give us the green light and say, all right, that can go forward. The idea of paying it forward, that is a big part of why I'm involved in mentoring. I'm very big on succession planning. A lot of organizations, and not just nonprofits, but even for-profit organizations, get caught up in this is a really great leader, okay, or leadership team, and don't put the time in that is necessary for succession planning. Those folks or that person is not going to be there forever. So if they do not plant the seeds, we sometimes see this in the political realm as well, where we've got a really great leader and everybody's engaged with them. And so they don't necessarily, though, cultivate someone to succeed them, to keep those policies, practices, what have you, going forward. And then the idea, too, having worked in higher ed, I think it's super important that we connect the dots for our graduates. The whole reason that they're getting that education is to get into their chosen field or industry, and as folks who are in those industries or related industries, we're the ones, like the graphic that you might see on the slideshow right now, we're helping sort of create that ladder for them so they can navigate that and perhaps not hit some of the minefields we may have hit in our own respective careers, but also to sharing with them some examples when we did it right.
Frank, that's a great segue to the next poll. So we want to ask you now, not only where you work or how large of an organization you work, but where you consider yourself to be in terms of your career. Now, keep in mind, this is according to you. This is subjective. So it's however you consider yourself, whether you're exploring careers, less than 5 years, 5 to 10 years of experience, 10 to 15, something else that isn't listed here. So go ahead and choose your option that best speaks to your experience and what you feel best speaks to your work. So again, exploring careers, less than 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15 years, or something else that isn't listed here. And for those who might be choosing something else, we'd love to know what that is if you want to share that. So go ahead and type that in the chat box when we close the poll, and we're able to share those results with you. And Frank, as we're sort of waiting for some responses, I'm curious, do you think that reverse mentoring is more or less impactful in a large organization versus a small organization? Do you think there's a difference?
I think, it's needed in both settings, but I think the advantage of a larger organization is that there's greater organizational capacity, there's a greater diversity of people that you can choose. If you're only working in an organization with 5 to 10 people, they just find out all the time. These days, let's face it, most people in our careers, and Karen and you and I have had this discussion, are doing the work of at least 2 people did, say, 10, 15 years ago, and sometimes wearing 3 different hats. So taking on something additional, such as being a mentor, can be rough. Being in a large organization may create more opportunities for that.
I completely agree. And as we just closed the poll to sort of articulate that, we're looking at lots of different people in all different areas, which is really something that speaks to reverse mentoring and its value. So we have about 9% of those who participated in the poll saying they're exploring careers. We have 18% saying 5 to 10 years of experience, 45% saying 10 to 15, and 27% saying something else that isn't listed here, which is great to hear. It's great to hear that so many people are doing other things. Someone else wrote more than 15 years of experience could be exploring career options and additional growth. Thank you. That's an excellent point. What do you think about that?
I think that it's very important to know that if you are exploring careers, to think of hooking up with a mentor to help navigate someone, regardless of the number of years of experience that they have, because of personal growth and development, maybe wanting to see what other areas within the same field do. Like Frank said, being in a big organization, we run the risk of having very siloed departments and not being able to put all the pieces together in a systematic workflow can be detrimental as well. So throughout our careers, whether we want promotions, whether the goal is to go up the ladder or not, or just have some sort of desire for a better understanding of the facility or the companies that we work in, it's probably a good idea throughout our tenure somewhere to hook up with different mentors and just to see varying points of view and to truly understand all the different departments that make up where people work.
I think your point is well taken. If I can piggyback on that for a second, Jen, what we're seeing in the workplace is it's not our fathers, mothers, or grandparents' workplace. What I mean by that is, in terms of business world and careers in all different sectors, what we're seeing, the research tell us, is that folks are going to make 2, 3, 4, 5 major transitions in their career during the course of their career. I had a grandfather who worked for a Nestle's company for 30 plus years. The whole idea of you get the gold watch and all that other stuff. That world has largely, if not totally, disappeared, at least from the American workplace anyway. I can only speak from that perspective. Internationally, it may be different. That being said, though, that makes it all the more important for us to have mentors and guides for transitions. We talked about in the poll, folks said, well, I might have more than 15 years experience, but I may be exploring careers. working in nonprofit human services, I often found folks who've gotten to a certain point in their career and said, I've done this, I've accomplished that. Now I'd like to take my skill set, my experience, and use it in some different way and sort of give back. And so there's a frequent sort of cross-pollination that takes place then between the for-profit and or government as well as the nonprofit human services sector.
Yeah, I agree with that, Frank. That's a really good point. And the reality of budgeting constraints now is basically we're in a world of mergers and acquisitions. It doesn't matter if it's healthcare or finance or any other business in between. It's very, very important that people are abreast of the latest trends, what's going on in all areas of the industry. And the only way to really do that, aside from researching on your own to get real good feedback and real-time experience, is to network and to find out through mentoring. So as a mentor, and again, going back to the opening slides of what is reverse mentoring, the benefits that a mentor gets from working with a mentee or many mentees like Frank and I have, in speaking with them, whether they're new grads, whether they're changing career fields, some of my mentees are older than I am, some are much younger than I am, which seems to be more of the norm lately. But I'm getting to learn about best practices, latest practices, changes in technology that I may not be using where I am, or some of my close colleagues may not know about. But in speaking with the newer grads and people that are going into newer companies, hearing about the new trends has been incredibly helpful to me because it gives me the ability to go and research a little bit more and see what I can bring back to the table at my own career. Helping bridging generational gaps in a multi-generational workplace. We see this, I believe, more now than we ever have. People are working longer. People coming out of college looking for managerial jobs right out of school. It's very, very important to understand as an administrator the different ways that the different generations expect to be spoken to, delegated to, partnered up with, and assisted in their different roles and responsibilities in the job. So in speaking to multi-generational mentees, that has helped me learn the approach to all of these different age groups is truly different for different reasons. Cultivating new talent. In speaking to mentees, I am very hopeful in my area of healthcare that we do have very bright, hopeful candidates that are going to be coming into our workforce that are very concerned with workforce development, or they wouldn't go out of their way when they could be home or shopping or doing something else. They have the desire to hook up with a mentor, to network on a weekend where they could be doing other things. There's a desire for them to do well and really put into real-time use what they're learning in school. Continued feeling of relevance for me as a quote-unquote seasoned professional, hearing myself talk about my experiences and trying to assist people in the navigation of different things. When I hear myself say it out loud, sometimes on the way home I go, wow, I've really done a lot more than I give myself credit for, and it kind of helps me stay in tune with the things that I need to do. In my classes, I lecture my students that it doesn't end with graduation. This is a constant work in progress. You always have to hone your skill. No industry stays stagnant. So in having the conversations with mentees and with colleague mentors, kicking different ideas around, it's really helped me know the directions that I want to go in as well.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to move into the whole multi-generational workplace, because that's something that my mentees and I have talked about a few times. Sometimes there's stereotypes between the generations of, what are young people like in today's workplace, and young people will sometimes have thoughts about folks like myself who are at the midpoint of their career, who've been around for a while. There may be that thought of, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, or stereotypes that the older generation has about young people coming into the workplace today. And I think it's good having those conversations where we can break those things down and talk about those different rather than deficits. The idea of cultivating a new talent, again, that speaks back to the whole idea of succession planning. Working to make your organization a learning organization, make it grow it to a state of excellence, involves identifying and cultivating those folks who are coming through the ranks who you see as being ready to or interested in taking on leadership roles, but there are different skill sets from somebody who's a good doer versus somebody who's a good manager. I think that's one of the biggest gaps that a lot of organizations have is they promote somebody who's a good doer, but then they don't set that person up for success by assisting them in gaining, if they don't have it already, the skills to successfully manage folks. Two different skill sets. And, when I've talked with my mentees about that, and they've talked to me about, how I navigated that, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully. It can be a very difficult thing. Sometimes if you now were a peer, and now you have to manage peers, and there can be all different, interpersonal issues that come into play. For me, again, like Jen, I'm at that midpoint in my career, and I do hope to retire sometime. So I want to help cultivate new talent, but also I want to feel relevant, that I still have something to contribute, that, hey, I'm not like just sitting on my laurels, but that I am able to give something back. And by me gaining things from my mentee, that helps me to continue to be a becoming member of my team, wherever it is I might find myself in my particular industry at that time.
I agree, Frank. And one of the things that you and I had discussed at length that we do with our mentees is at this point in our careers, we've conducted a lot of interviews. We've received a lot of resumes, a lot of CVs, and in working with our mentees, doing mock interviews with them as another area of focus. Maybe the younger mentees that don't know how to negotiate contracts for themselves or negotiate salary or even how to create an appropriate CV or resume. For those mentees just coming out of school, they may feel that they don't have enough to put on a resume. So some of the things that we discuss in resume building is basically what leadership roles did you have at the college? What volunteerism have you been a part of and taken part with? Because that all translates into skill sets in the workforce. And they're all things that can be built upon and developed. So having the experience of conducting many interviews, I know, Frank, that you had spoken about doing mock interviews with your mentees at length.
Yes, I think that's really important. I wish someone had done that with me. We also talked all about something that's happening with what we're seeing now in the workplace, if I recall, about this whole phenomenon of ghosting. In other words, folks maybe making a change in their mind about going to an interview or doing something, but not realizing the necessity and importance of properly communicating that to the hiring manager, recruiter, whoever it is, not sending any kind of communication, either for that, or even if you've accepted the job and then a better offer came along. That's fine. But if you do that on a regular basis, that's going to damage your reputation. That's going to follow you around. And guess what? Sometimes, especially in certain industries, you're going to possibly meet those people again, or they're going to know folks that you're interviewing with, and so that could harm you in various ways in your career progression. So don't ghost folks. Do the right thing. If you've made a change of heart or a better offer's come along, have the courtesy to pick the phone, email, call, text, whatever it is that you'll do, but some flow of communication. This way you're not burning a bridge whether you realize it or not with the other party. Again, I guess it's that golden rule of treating the folks as if how you want to be treated. And that will be also remembered, that reputation, those positive impressions will also precede you when you walk into a room or meet people at a networking event, etc.
Frank, that was such a great segue to this slide and the Harvard Business Review article that really sort of set a basis for this entire webinar and our conversations about reverse mentoring when we started talking about multi-generational needs, wants, and sort of unexpected challenges. While this webinar is not specifically focused on millennials, we wanted to highlight this group because it's a group that often, as Jen has mentioned, whether it's technology or other forms of cross-pollination, this group has been able to really affect, as Jen mentioned, seasoned professionals in a lot of ways. There's also significant challenges that come along with that, which Jen and Frank will explain in a moment, but we wanted to just segue to this because it's such a great conversation to have. And as you think about the things that Frank and Jen are saying, feel free to type in comments, any questions that you might have, any commentary that you want to add in response to what they're saying. I know we have some recruiters and HR managers here, so any thoughts or insights that you want to add to the discussion would be welcome. So when we talk about what millennials want from their boss, helping me navigate my career path, that isn't necessarily the same as when we would typically think of navigating a career path, let's say, even 5 years ago, even 10 years ago. How does it look now, or how does this look differently for millennials?
So what I found in dealing with millennials at work and hiring them and having them as mentees and speaking with them, having a boss navigate a career path, there are some areas that it's kind of up to the employee to determine where they want to go. But again, they may not be aware in their own industry what departments or what jobs are even available that would be in their scope. So really giving them the tools to network and to encourage them to really look a little bit outside of their departments, their facilities, what other systems are in New York. Would you prefer to be out of state? Or like Frank said, this isn't really the time of I've done my 20, 25 years, I got my watch, and now I'm retiring. Sometimes there is the navigation out the door in the career path or to another state. And what are the realistic expectations of what the millennials are looking to do in their specific industries, what is really appropriate and what's realistic?
Jen, I think you just touched on something really important, the expectations. I think it's managing expectations, normalizing certain things that could be initially confusing, just jarring, even emotional for people entering the workforce in a particular life or stage of life. And it was actually really interesting. Frank, I'm curious, because you and I talk about this all the time. I read an article the other day that was all about professional communication now, irrespective to groups or multi-generational, but it was all about don't call me before you text. And it was all about really texting as the main form of communication, to schedule meetings, to check in with people as a way to really set up all these different types of in-person interactions. So even in that way, navigating that path and working with professionals who aren't in that mode and aren't used to communicating and scheduling and communicating that way. I'm curious what types of things could happen in those types of situations with respect to technology and texting in general.
Well, it's so true. I have learned from my mentees, in scheduling our own meetings, be they phone conferences or face-to-faces, that there are different communication styles on that. Some folks prefer texting. Some folks prefer emails. Some folks prefer that phone kind of thing first as a prior. The thing is to establish with each other, I think, what you're going to use. And again, the mentees sort of expose you to what some of the norms are for their generation. And, there's no judgment necessarily involved, It's an evolving flow. And I think, as new technology comes out, I use email very actively. I use social media. Not a big fan of Facebook, unfortunately. Sorry, not to be a hater. But I use LinkedIn quite extensively and encourage my mentees who don't have a profile to get one as great means of sharing information, like an article or something like that we see. I know some of my own mentees. I've seen job opportunities and or articles and resources that I thought they would find useful, and so I've shared it with them. And then ultimately, it's gone in the other direction, where those folks have shared resources and what have you with me. We've done resume development. But the communication thing is very important. And again, Managing different expectations, as was mentioned before, too, and that is true. Both around communication, around hiring, about starting one's career, but also about transitions, too. You know, sometimes I'm dealing with a person who has been in one career for a long time and helping them to understand the whole repackaging, retooling. Maybe the job that you did for a long time, this has happened, you know, in recent years, is suddenly no longer around. And you've identified yourself so strongly with that particular role for such a long time, you can't see yourself as anything but, say, an accountant, let's say, or a higher education administrator, or a nurse, what have you. But for whatever reason, maybe just in your local area, that's disappeared. Helping that person to take a look at transferable skills. They don't even know about the concept of transferable skills. And how do we take your experiences, your skill set, and package it in such a way that can facilitate you making that transition?
That's an excellent point, Frank. And one of the things that I have done is translate military resumes of military members that are out processing from being in the service for, 10, 15, 20 years. Now they're coming into civilian sector, and they have these beautiful resumes, but if you don't understand as a civilian, especially a civilian in healthcare, what those things translate into, it's very difficult to put these highly skilled, highly intelligent individuals into appropriate roles. You talked before about setting people up for failure if there are not the tools. The translation of resumes among different sectors and among different career paths is very important. Recently, I met someone who has been in the banking industry for an incredibly long period of time and was very, very successful in banking, wants to break into healthcare and knew that translatable and transferable skills were there, but was not quite sure of certain areas of healthcare that this would fit. And in sitting and speaking with him and going over his incredible resume, so much of it equated to what's emerging in the healthcare industry right now. So you brought up a very good point about those skill sets.
As we segue to questions and some discussion and some more polls and a little bit of information about the mentoring program that Jen and Frank are a part of here at St. Joseph's College, we wanted to direct you to some really great resources on reverse mentoring. So the way these resources are set up, we couldn't just deliver them to you as handouts, but we wanted to make sure you had the exact links on where to find them. This webinar recording will be sent to all participants after the webinar is concluded, but if you want to take a screenshot of this right now, go ahead and do that. So you can check out these articles at any point later, today, tomorrow night, anytime that you feel like it's convenient for you. So we wanted to direct you to these resources. And Jen, there was one specifically that you had put on there that you wanted to direct everyone to, right?
Yeah, that was the 7 utterly brilliant benefits of reverse mentoring. Everything that we've discussed today in that article, it touches on the benefits to the mentor.
Yeah, this is just an example too. I mean, these were 3 that we found that we thought were useful. There's a whole host of stuff out there, and depending upon your industry, your experience level, etc., you may find different things that are more helpful to you than others. But this is a good example to kind of get you started at least. And I know I certainly learned some things from it. I took things that were experiential for me and then put them into a theoretical framework. And I'm always a big believer too. I'm really going to include this slide, Karen, because for me, anytime there's a training, be it a webinar or face-to-face or a seminar, that's the beginning of the learning. This is not the end. We're taking you, introducing you to the subject today. And my hope is that you will then go on and, however it's pertinent to you, continue your learning. If the subject is interesting enough for you to participate in this webinar, you'll take that and run with it. And so for me, this is part of that, is giving you a tool with some literature and what have you, and links to start that learning process and continue it.
Just a couple more polls that we have for you as we begin to wrap up that portion of the webinar. So before we get any further into mentoring, we have some more for you. We want to find out if you consider yourself any of these roles. If you consider yourself a mentor, a mentee, both, I'm not sure, or something else that isn't listed here. Go ahead and choose, and you can choose more than one. So if you consider yourself a mentor and a mentee, go ahead and choose both. If you're not sure you know enough about either one of those roles or, those kinds of labels to be able to say, I'm a mentor, I'm a mentee, that's okay too. So go ahead and choose what you feel is best. Once again, a mentor, a mentee, both, I'm not sure, or something else that isn't listed here. I do see we have a question, so I'll get to that in a second.
Somebody read my mind. I've been thinking to myself, why hasn't anybody checked that? They want us to be more participatory. We're not the only brains in the room.
You're giving them a lot to think about.
That's so true.
Let's go ahead and close that poll. So you let us know, based on your feedback, that 10% of you consider yourself a mentor, 70% of you consider yourself both. So you consider yourself a mentee and a mentor. 20% say, I'm not sure. And nobody says something else that isn't listed here. So that's really great to hear that many of you consider yourselves both a mentee and a mentor, because that's going to really serve you well if you're interested in joining our SJC Mentor Program. But before we officially sort of get into that, let's answer our question here. I think someone had a question. I can't see it. So if you want to go ahead and type that again, go ahead and feel free to do that. Sorry about that. We'll hopefully get to your questions too.
Please.
So we wanted to find out who was a mentor or a mentee, or who considers yourselves in those roles, because we have an amazing program here for those of you who are friends of the college, as well as faculty, staff, students, or alumni. If you're a friend of the college, you're eligible to be a mentor, to work with our students or recent grads, any alum at any level of their professional career, whether they're exploring, whether they're transitioning, whether they're interested in one career over another in an exploratory way. So we have plenty of opportunity, and we always welcome our friends of the college, just like Frank Pomata, to join us and dedicate some time. If you genuinely love what you do, if you want to share that information with others, and you want to give a little bit of service to, St. Joseph's College, we really and truly appreciate that. It's one of the lifetime benefits here that we offer students and alums. So basically, at any point in their professional career, whether they're a student, whether it's a day after they graduated, 10 years out, a year out, they're always eligible to join the program as a mentor or a mentee. So with that being said, if you find yourself a student or an alum, a faculty or a staff member of St. Joseph's College, and you're interested in seeking out a mentor that has at least 10 to 15 years of professional experience in your field, we want to be able to connect you with somebody who will work with you one-on-one, just like Jen and Frank do with their respective mentees, to focus on the specific goals and needs and desires that you're interested in as far as building your career and setting yourself up for whatever it is that you're interested in, whether it's joining an organization, a professional network, whether it's finding out the difference between clinical versus non-clinical careers. You'll always be able to find a great mentor here at St. Joseph's College as a mentee. And if you're a mentor, if you're looking to give back, if you find yourself at any point with some time, and again, you genuinely love what you love to do, you want to share that with others, you want to share a little bit about your insights and expertise with a potential mentee, that's a great opportunity for you to join our program as a mentor. We can pair mentors one-on-one, or we can also have you work with groups of mentees if that's something you're interested in doing. So if you'd like to do that, go ahead and email me at tcatusian@sjcn1.edu. Again, go ahead and feel free to grab that off the screenshot, and we'll also be sending that to you at the end of the webinar presentation as well.
Karen, you made me think of something here. As mentors and also working with our mentees, putting it into a larger context, there's increasing diversity in the workplace, and that's something that we can talk with our mentees, and they can tell us about their own experiences about. I know that as someone who works in human services and nonprofits, that it's sometimes referred to as a pink-collar profession because a lot of men are not in those fields. That being said, I've been a passionate evangelist, if you will, if I could use that term, for working in those capacities. And for me, money is not the primary motivator. I want to do a job that's aligned with my values and where I feel like I'm doing something that when I go home at night, that's not to put anybody else down and what their choices are, but for me, I want to go home at night and think about and feel good about what I did. Hopefully I made some sort of a difference, small or large, in someone's life or in my community. And so for me, exposing folks to human services and nonprofits as a sector is very important to me, and that's been part of my mentoring. But again, back to the whole diversity thing. When I was running an after-school program, one of the things I actually did was try to get males to be our tutors, because there was a dearth of males there, and yet the students wanted that. Many of them came from single-parent, female-led households, and so they had a hunger, both male and female students, for men, as positive male role models. Conversely, in many organizations, we talk about that glass ceiling, if you will. Well, I've tried very hard when I have had the opportunities, given I've been in a female-dominated settings often, to create opportunities for women to advance. I think that that's super important. The world is changing, the business environment is changing, and to appreciate that. And our mentees can tell us about their experiences. Are their experiences in the same barriers, structural barriers as we encountered early in our career, or is the landscape hopefully improving in some way, shape, or form, and we and our mentees can be an active part of that whole thing, that process.
That's a great point, because the only way to mitigate those issues, or like you said, to find out if they still exist, is to speak with people that are just coming in and may have that experience. One of the things I wanted to touch upon is that as a mentor, if you reach out to Taryn and set yourself up with that and what it all means, it doesn't have to be a very strictly regulated, we're meeting every third Tuesday of the month at 9 o'clock. These are things that we're given the ability to work out scheduling with the mentees, what works best for everyone involved. I've held meetings in very formal settings, but my favorite is the local coffee shop right here in Patchogue, supporting local business at the same time as meeting with the mentees and having a more casual, relaxed conversation in a more relaxed atmosphere, depending on the path they want to go down and what's going on with them at that point in time. So I really encourage everyone to reach out to either be set up as a mentee or a mentor, because you can absolutely make it work.
And again, speaking to that flexibility, you don't always need to be face-to-face. Perhaps the mentee in this particular instance might just need you on a given time to look at their resume, review it. So that's an email exchange. Maybe they're on their way to an interview and they're nervous about something like that. Ask me a question.
Yep.
That could be a quick flip of a text back and forth, between you and them. Then there are the face-to-faces, and I'm like Jen, Panera's and our local coffee shop in town tend to be my two haunts. I've also met here on campus occasionally when it was pertinent. There've been a few times we've used the library or computer lab and we wanted to do something online, and that was great to have the access to the facilities here at St. Joe's and be able to utilize the technology and other resources that were available to us here. So again, it doesn't always have to be face-to-face. The structure, like I said, it's not this whole big formal thing. Really, you and your mentee or mentees work it out with what works with your schedule and your preferences. And that's the great thing for me about it, too. It's very easy for me to serve as a mentor the last several years.
Thank you both for those great perspectives on mentoring, especially from the two of you who are active and engaged in mentoring, not only here at St. Joseph College, but throughout your professional networks and, in every way throughout your lives. So thank you both for those thoughts.
Thank you.
We also just wanted to mention before we get to our discussion, and feel free to, if you have some questions that you're thinking about, feel free to go ahead and type them in the chat box. This was the second webinar in our winter webinar series. We're looking forward to our next one next week, which is Finding Your Way with Mid-Career Mentors. It's taking place on Wednesday, March 6th. We're going to hear from two alumni guest speakers who will be talking about not only their connection to each other with respect to mid-career mentors, but why mid-career mentors is really something that's often overlooked and why it's extremely valuable for all of us at any stage of our career. We'd also like to remind you that this webinar was free, as is all of our webinars in our alumni webinar series and in our alumni video vault, and we're only able to do that with the support of our community. So we're proud to announce that we're launching a Giving Day on May 1st, 2019. It's the first ever Giving Day here at St. Joseph College. It'll be 24 hours. It'll be a huge social media campaign. To learn more, visit giving.sjcny.edu so you can find out how you can stay connected. and we're really excited about this. We think it's an amazing campaign, and we can't wait for you to learn more about it. So for those of you who are thinking about your questions right now and typing them in the chat box, I wanted to ask the both of you, do you think that reverse mentoring is more significant now that it has a name, or do you feel like this is really something more people engage in than they really realize?
For me, it was something that I knew I was benefiting from. I just didn't know there was a name associated with it. There are entire areas of study that show giving back to community, giving back to other people makes individuals feel better, perform better, and feel like a whole human being. So I believe in the doing good, I really do. And so I knew the benefits that I was gaining both personally and for my career, but again, didn't know that there was an actual name to go along with that.
My experience is pretty much the same as Jen's there. I think it was happening, I was perceiving it happening, on a regular basis in different mentoring relationships, but putting it now a name to it and what have you just merely makes it more explicit.
Absolutely. Well, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the second webinar in our winter webinar series, Making the Most of Reverse Mentoring. You will receive a survey immediately following the conclusion of the webinar. It's just going to pop up on your screen. Your feedback is extremely important to us. We really utilize this feedback not only for future webinars, but to continually improve all of our programs. So please go ahead and fill out that survey. We'll also be sending you the webinar recording and also another reminder to take that survey within a few days as well. Thank you again, Jen and Frank, for being with us, and thank you everyone for joining us today and supporting not only Frank and Jen, but St. Joseph's College and the FJC Mentor Program.
Thank you. Become a mentor.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Or
Have a great afternoon.